Atomic Heart is a first-person shooter set in an alternate history where Soviet is dominating the Cold War due to scientific breakthroughs. Soviet has then created a flying city where they are gathering all of their best scientists for all of their fun experiments. Sadly, something seems to go wrong with the robots.
What the hell are you doing, you lousy bot? Get your rusty metal asses out of here!
That was really very rude of them.
And you then play as an angry military dude, armed with a magical left hand that can shoot lightning. And a bunch of other abilities that he can learn from terminals, where a fun cartoon will explain them for him. The setting does seem like a mix of Bioshock 1 and 2, and the developers wears this on their sleeves.
So that's Neptune, huh? Looks nice. Actually, it looks amazing. A rapture.
Surface level similarities aside, the flying cities quickly gets forgotten, and Atomic Heart is very much its own thing. If we start with the presentation, then it is overall very nice. The voice acting is good, the music is nice, and there are plenty of nice looking cutscenes and monsters.
Please, Comrade Molotov, I beg you. It's not safe here.
So it's still dangerous. I was told everything was under control.
There was a minor issue, but Major Nechayev, forgive me, Agent.
The environments can also look great, although they can be very static.
Shameful display!
I know that this is quite common in modern games, but when a game has a gravity gun, then it sticks out. Also, a lot of the environments are underground labs, and they can be a bit repetitive and boring after a while. Something I associate with the Bioshock games is great storytelling, and Atomic Heart is not living up to that standard, to put it mildly.
Hey, let's put a cookie in there. Yeah, even locks like cookies, right? Charles?
Yes?
Do you like cookies?
Ahem.
The cutscenes might be pretty, and there are some interesting ideas and plot points, but the execution is just rubbish. The main character is as unlikable as he is incompetent, and he barely contributes to the plot at all. He is a glorified errand boy, and often you are fighting through facility after facility for very thin reasons.
Did they scatter her all over the complex or something?
Precisely. How did you know, dear comrade?
Call it a hunch. Do I have to scour the entire VD&H for her parts?
Plug the administrative control drive into me, so I can tell you where the pieces of poor Claire currently are.
You are bombarded with audio logs and emails, but they are boring and do little to develop the plot and flesh out the few characters that does exist. So what do you do if you have a bunch of levels ready and need to inject some storytelling into them? Well, you add someone that talks to you throughout the level, and in this game this is the magical talking hand. It could have worked, but the dialogue is not very good, and often it is not connected to what you are actually experiencing in the level.
Charles, so after Dr. Sechenov created the new gamma connectors, he destroyed the old beta connectors, right?
It can feel like they have recorded a long conversation, and then they just cut it up into smaller pieces so that they can drip feed them to you throughout the levels. Overall, I just found the storytelling and characters in this game to be very poor, and that is not something that any pretty cutscenes can compensate for.
Did you enjoy it, big guy?
Yeah. Cool.
Use this powerful weapon to split the skulls of your enemies and bring me gifts so we can get down and dirty. I'll show you what real smut feels like. Me instead. I'll do whatever you want.
Just give me laser protection.
Oh, so brutal. I'm shaking. Squirt your polymers.
Alright. Yep. What? Skipped.
There is a lot of time spent on the setting though, and it can be interesting at times. There are plenty of cool statues and buildings, and from a visual standpoint it is nice. However, I never felt that it was all that believable or coherent. There were plenty of rooms where I felt that this is a video game level and not a real place. And why do we have a bunch of small rundown houses on a newly built flying island with facilities where thousands of people are working? But whatever, point is that if you enter this game expecting the setting and storytelling from BioShock, then you will be disappointed. So let us move on to the gameplay. As said before, the game is mainly you exploring a bunch of different facilities. There are some open world sections with some side activities, but the focus is on the linear paths. There are plenty of puzzles to break up the shooting, which I appreciate. They are not the greatest puzzles, and sometimes they overstay their welcome, but still they were fine. The combat is all over the place. It can certainly be fun.
What you staring at? How do you like that, gearhead?
But there are a number of different issues. The big one is how bullet spongy the enemies are. They take a lot to kill, and it makes the guns feel underpowered and boring.
I'm detecting even more enemy signatures, Major.
Several bosses also have so much health that I ran out of ammo long before killing them. This takes us into the second issue. Enemies don't drop ammo, and you need to either craft ammo or find it in the environment. Crafting ammo takes the same resources as upgrading your weapons, so you have an incentive to avoid doing it. So what you can do instead is to use your energy weapons and magical attacks that charges over time instead, and the optimal way to play seems to be to rely on these as much as is possible. The number of weapons in the game is already very poor, but this drives the player to limit themselves to even fewer weapons. Weapons that, in my opinion, are not as fun to use. Then the developers made the baffling decision to have respawning enemies in the open world sections. Whenever you kill anything, bots will be sent out to resurrect the robots. And if you are unlucky enough to kill anything in front of a camera, then prepare for a never-ending onslaught of robots. This is by itself not all that fun, but with the ammo constraints, it is downright awful. Now the combat itself is fine. Most of the enemies are melee focused and have some kind of charge attack that you need to dodge. It can become a bit of a clusterfuck when you are fighting a large number of enemies and you will often dash around like a madman. It is not as bad as many other arena shooters, but I still found it exhausting at times. You have a bunch of magical abilities that can be fun, but I found them to be kind of underdeveloped. For instance, you have an electrocution ability, but then it doesn't travel through water.
What the hell are we supposed to do?
I have lived.
In a classic Atomic Heart fashion, they try to explain it away in some throwaway dialogue.
Hey Charles, how come shock can go through polymer but not through regular water? Is all the water here distilled or something?
In a similar way, you have an ability which is kind of like the gravity gun. But then the environments are almost completely static and you can barely pick anything up to use with it. It is not great. I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but it does give the impression that they added a bunch of things with high ambitions, but then they had to cut down on their ambitions to get the game out, and it results in this kind of incoherent feeling at times. Still, the combat is at its core fine, and when the music kicks in, it can be really fun. The biggest issue though is the length of the game and how much of the combat there is. This is a long game, 20 hours or more, and the enemy and weapon variety grows stale long before the end of the game, and the combat is just not good enough to carry it. It just grew exhausting and repetitive at the end of the game, which brings us into the open world sections. In the second half of the game, you have access to a small open world. There isn't a whole lot of things to do in it besides exploring it for loot. There are small mini facilities though, which you can explore for upgrades to your weapons. I explored one of them, but then I skipped them because it became clear that the game would overstay its welcome anyway. Before I conclude, I should mention the bugs. Enemies sometimes bugged out and stopped attacking. I had one repeat issue where the game would get stuck when it tried to give me an item when my inventory was full. There are also other weird things that happens from time to time. All in all, I left Atomic Heart with a disappointed feeling. This is the type of game that I like, and there is a decent game in here somewhere. But it is a very confused game that doesn't seem to know what it wants to be. The biggest issue is that it feels bloated, and I would probably have much fonder memories of the game if it was 10 hours shorter. I assume they wanted it to appear bigger to justify full price, and there is something funny about that when it then ends up on Xbox Game Pass almost immediately.